The check was already filled out when he handed it to me. Neat handwriting. His wife's, not his. I recognized the loops on the G in thousand. The careful way she aligned the numbers, as if precision could disguise insult. $10,000. I held the paper between my fingers a moment longer than necessary, feeling the texture. Cheap stock, not even embossed. A small thing, perhaps. But I have always believed that small things betray large truths. Dad, Ethan said, clearing his throat. This is actually more than fair considering the circumstances. Circumstances. That word hung in the air between us like a smell you can't quite place, but know is unpleasant. I was sitting at the kitchen table. The same oak table Margaret and I bought in 1987 for $1,200 from a furniture store that no longer exists. The varnish had worn down in the places where her elbows used to rest. There was still a faint scratch from when she dropped a cast iron pan one Sunday afternoon, laughing as if it were the most natural thing in the world to damage something you loved. Now the table felt larger, colder. Across from me, my son adjusted the cuff of his shirt. Crisp white, probably new. He had developed a taste for expensive things lately, things he hadn't paid for. His wife, Lauren, stood near the counter, arms folded. She didn't sit. She never sat when she came here, as if the chair might obligate her to stay longer than necessary. You understand, she added, her voice smooth and practiced. The market is unpredictable. We're actually taking a risk here. A risk. I looked past them toward the refrigerator. There was a magnet shaped like a lighthouse. Bar Harbor, 1998. Margaret insisted we buy it, even though it cost $6.50, which at the time I said was ridiculous for a piece of painted plastic. Someday, she said, you'll be glad we kept something small from a good day. I suppose she was right. Of course, I said. My voice sounded calm. It surprised even me. Ethan relaxed slightly. I could see it in his shoulders. He had been expecting resistance. Maybe he was seen. Something loud and embarrassing that he could later describe to friends as difficult. But I had no intention of giving him that satisfaction. He pushed the check a little closer across the table. You can deposit it today if you want, or tomorrow, whatever works for you. I nodded, folding it carefully once, then again. Precision matters. Tell me something, I said. Lauren shifted. Ethan's jaw tightened just slightly. When did you decide the house was worth $10,000? It's not like that, Ethan said quickly. You're still living here. This is more like an advance, a gesture. We'll take care of everything moving forward. Maintenance, taxes, utilities. I already take care of those, I interrupted. Silence. Lauren stepped in, as she always did when he faltered. What Ethan means, she said, is that it doesn't make sense for you to manage such a large asset at your age. The property was appraised last month at just over $1 million, yes. But liquidity is another matter. There are costs, risks, legal exposure. She spoke like a brochure. Clean sentences. No warmth. I watched her lips move and thought about the time I wired $120,000 on June 14, 2019, to cover Ethan's temporary business shortfall. I remember the confirmation email. The subject line, wire transfer completed, $120,000. Temporary. That appraisal, I said quietly, was done by whom? Ethan hesitated, just a fraction of a second. But I saw it. A firm, he said. A professional firm. Name. Lauren answered instead. Henderson and Blythe Realty. I nodded slowly. Interesting. I knew Henderson. Not well, but well enough. I unfolded the check again, smoothing it flat against the table. $10,000. For a house I had paid off in 2008. Final mortgage payment. $3,842.17. I remember the exact amount because Margaret and I had opened a bottle of cheap champagne that night and laughed about how anticlimactic it felt to finally own something outright. We sat right here at this table. She said, now no one can ever take this from us. I believed her. That was my mistake. Dad, Ethan said softer now, we're trying to help you. Help. There it was again. That word people use when they're about to take something and want to feel noble about it. I looked at him properly, then. Really looked. My son, 52 years old, gray at the temples, wearing a watch that cost more than my first car. A man who once cried because his bicycle tire went flat and he didn't know how to fix it. I taught him how. I taught him many things. Some, perhaps, too well. And in exchange, I said, you take ownership of the property. It's just paperwork, Lauren said quickly. We're family. Paperwork, yes. I had heard that word before, usually right before losing money. I stood up slowly. My knees complained, but not as much as they used to. Small mercy. I'll deposit the check, I said. Relief washed over Ethan's face so quickly it was almost embarrassing to witness. Good, he said. That's good, Dad. This is the right decision. The right decision. I walked them to the door. Have it. Even now. Lauren kissed the air somewhere near my cheek. Ethan gave me a brief, awkward pat on the shoulder, as if I were a colleague, not a father. Call me if you need anything, he said. I almost laughed. The door closed behind them with a soft click. Not dramatic, not final, just quiet. I stood there for a moment, listening to the sound of their car pulling away. Engine first, then gravel, then nothing. The house settled around me. The refrigerator hummed. The clock on the wall ticked. 2:17 p.m., a Tuesday. I walked back to the kitchen table and sat down again. The check lay where I had left it, pale blue against the wood. $10,000. I reached for the phone. My fingers didn't tremble. That was the interesting part. After 71 years, you learn that anger is most useful when it is precise. I dialed a number I hadn't used in months. It rang twice. Margaret and Cole Financial Services. A familiar voice answered. This is Daniel speaking. Daniel, I said. It's Richard Hale. A pause, then warmth. Mr. Hale, I didn't expect to hear from you today. Is everything all right? I looked at the check one last time. No, I said, allowing myself the smallest smile. But I believe it's about to be. I leaned back in my chair. Tell me, I continued, what happens when someone tries to sell a property they don't actually control? There was a longer pause this time, the kind that means the conversation has just become interesting. Well, Daniel said carefully, that depends on the documentation. Why do you ask? I closed my eyes for a second, picturing Margaret at this table, the scratch in the wood, the cheap champagne. They just handed me $10,000, I said. For a house worth $1 million? Silence. Then, I see. Yes, I replied. I thought you might. I opened my eyes again and looked around the kitchen. The chipped tiles, the old kettle, the light that flickered if you didn't tap the switch just right. My house. Daniel, I said quietly. I think it's time we reviewed the trust documents. And somewhere, deep under the weight of years and patience and very careful decisions, something began to move. If you believe older voices still matter, support this channel with a like and a subscription. There is a particular kind of silence that settles in a house after betrayal. It is not loud. It does not demand attention. It simply rearranges things. Objects remain where they were, but their meaning shifts. The kettle still whistles. The floor still creaks near the hallway. But now every sound feels like it belongs to someone else's life. I left the check on the table and made myself tea. Loose leaf. Earl Grey. Margaret used to say, tea tasted better when you could see what you were drinking. Bags are for people in a hurry, she would tell me, tapping the porcelain teapot like it was a small, stubborn animal. I poured the water carefully. 85 degrees. Not boiling. Never boiling. Some habits survive everything. As I waited for the leaves to settle, I opened the drawer beside the refrigerator. The second one down. It stuck slightly. You had to pull it at an angle. Inside there was a folder. Brown. Unremarkable. The kind of thing you might throw away without looking twice. I had labeled it years ago in black ink. Ethan transfers. I brought it to the table and sat down slowly, the chair legs making that familiar scrape against the tile. For a moment I didn't open it, not because I didn't want to, but because I already knew what was inside. Numbers, dates, trust, and the slow, methodical erosion of both. I flipped it open. The first page was a printout, June 14th, 2019. Wire transfer, $120,000. Recipient, Hale Logistics, LLC. Reference, short-term operating deficit. Short-term. I remember the call. Dad, it's just a cash flow issue, Ethan had said, pacing. I could hear it in his voice. We've got 3 contracts pending. Once those clear, I'll pay you back immediately. This is just to bridge the gap. How much? I asked. A pause. Always the pause. 120. I remember leaning against this very counter, staring at the same chip tile. That's not a gap, I said. That's a hole. He laughed. Nervous. Defensive. Come on, Dad. Don't make this complicated. Don't make this complicated. It is remarkable how often that phrase appears right before something becomes exactly that. I wired the money at 11:42 a.m. The confirmation email arrived at 11:44. He sent me a thumbs up emoji at 11:47. No contract. No repayment schedule. Just family. I turned the page. September 3rd, 2020. ACH transfer. $48,500. Memo equipment lease buyout. That one had been Lauren's idea. We're hemorrhaging on leasing costs, she explained over dinner, cutting into a $42 steak I paid for. Owning the equipment outright would improve margins immediately. Margins, I nodded, because I had once believed that using the right words meant understanding the situation. And how much would that cost? I asked. Just under 50, she said smoothly. But it's an investment, not an expense. Investment. I paid it the next morning. The equipment, as far as I know, no longer exists. Sold, probably, or repossessed, or quietly replaced with something newer, financed under a different name. The paper trail doesn't lie. People do. I kept turning pages. March 12, 2021. Check. $22,300. Payee. Silverline Events. Memo wedding balance. Their wedding. Lauren had cried when the venue threatened to cancel. It's non-refundable, she said, her voice trembling in a way that felt rehearsed. We'll lose everything. Everything. I remember standing in my study, holding the invoice. $22,300 remaining. Due immediately. Didn't you budget for this? I asked. Ethan avoided my eyes. We did. Things just shifted. Things always shift when it isn't your money. Margaret was already gone by then. 3 months. The house still smelled faintly of her lavender soap. I signed the check that night. At the wedding, Lauren's father gave a speech about family support and building a future together. He never mentioned me. I didn't expect him to. I turned another page. The amounts got smaller, more frequent. $3,200. Urgent tax discrepancy. $5,800. Payroll delay. $2,450. Insurance shortfall. $9,700. Client default coverage. Each one came with a story. Each story came with urgency. And urgency, I have learned, is the enemy of scrutiny. I stopped halfway through the folder and leaned back in my chair. The tea had gone cold. Across the table, the $10,000 check sat like a punchline. I added the numbers in my head. $120,000. $48,500. $22,300. And dozens more. The total wasn't exact. I had stopped tracking with precision somewhere around $300,000. Not because I couldn't. Because I didn't want to see it all in one place. It does something to a man, seeing the full extent of his own generosity turned into leverage against him. Dad, we're trying to help you. I let out a short laugh. Help. I stood up and walked to the window. The backyard looked the same as it always had. The fence I repaired in 2004. The oak tree Margaret insisted we keep, even when the roots started cracking the patio. Some things, she said, are worth the inconvenience. I suppose she was right about that, too. Behind me, the phone sat on the table. Daniel would be waiting, not impatiently, but attentively. There's a difference. I picked it up again. He answered on the first ring this time. Mr. Hale, he said, I've pulled your file. Of course he had. And I asked. A pause. Papers shifting. Well, he said slowly, your son appears to be operating under a significant misunderstanding. I smiled. That would be consistent. The property, he continued, is not in your personal name. It's held under the Hale Family Trust, established April 17th, 2009. I closed my eyes briefly. I remember that day. Margaret in a blue dress. The lawyer explaining contingencies, protection, structure. You insisted on that clause, Daniel added. The one requiring dual authorization for any transfer or sale. Yes, I said. Margaret insisted. And the second signatory, he continued, is not your son. No, I said quietly. It isn't. Silence. The kind that builds. Would you like me to proceed? Daniel asked. I looked at the folder, at the numbers, at the check, at everything they thought I had forgotten. Yes, I said. My voice was calm, steady. Let's see how they explain this one. There's a certain arrogance in people who believe paperwork is a formality. They sign where they're told. They skim instead of read. They trust summaries instead of structure. And most dangerously, they assume that what benefited them once will continue to benefit them forever. Margaret never allowed that kind of thinking. Read everything, she used to say, sliding documents across this very table. And if you don't understand it, read it again until you do. April 17th, 2009. I remember the date because it rained that morning. One of those slow, steady spring rains that makes everything feel deliberate. We drove to the attorney's office in silence. Windshield wipers marking time like a metronome. The office itself smelled faintly of leather and paper. Old money, old caution. Mr. and Mrs. Hale, the attorney said, adjusting his glasses. What we're proposing here is not complicated, but it is precise. Precise. Margaret liked that word. He laid out the structure in clean, careful terms. The house, our house, would be placed into a trust, the Hale family trust. Ownership would no longer be personal. It would be conditional. Think of it as a box, he explained, tapping the folder. You still control the box, but the contents are protected from external misunderstandings. Margaret smiled at that. I remember it clearly. And internal ones, she asked. The attorney paused. Yes, he said. Those as well. We both knew what he meant. Our children. Even then the signs were there. Small things. Requests that came too easily. Gratitude that faded too quickly. We don't want to punish them, I said at the time. Of course not, the attorney replied. This isn't punishment. It's structure. Structure. A word that sounds like restraint but functions as protection. I turned another page in the current file Daniel had emailed me just 20 minutes earlier. A scanned copy of the original trust agreement. Clean, intact, unchanged. Clause 4.2. Transfer of real property. Any sale, transfer, or encumbrance of trust-held real estate requires written authorization from both designated trustees. 2 signatures. Always 2. I had signed. Margaret had signed. After she passed, the secondary authority transferred, not to Ethan, as he had once casually assumed, but exactly as we had specified. I reached for the second document Daniel had sent. Amendment, July 2nd, 2016. That had been Margaret's doing. Just in case, she said. Just in case. The amendment named the secondary trustee. Not family. Not emotional. Professional. Daniel Cole. I smiled slightly. Mr. Hale? Daniel's voice came through the phone again, steady as ever. He had stayed on the line while I reviewed the documents. A courtesy, or perhaps curiosity. I'm here, I said. I've also located something else you should see. A soft click. Another email arrived. I open it. Henderson and Blythe Realty. Preliminary sale inquiry. Date, March 3rd, 2026. Initiated by Ethan Hale. I let out a quiet breath. So, that's how far this had gone. He contacted them 3 weeks ago, Daniel said. Requested evaluation and preliminary listing discussion. Did he present himself as the owner? I asked. Yes. Of course he did. And did they verify that claim? I continued. Another pause. Not thoroughly enough. I almost laughed. The room felt different now. Sharper, like the edges had come back into focus. I walked to the cabinet and took out a glass. Not for tea this time. Something stronger. Margaret kept a bottle of bourbon for special occasions. I suppose this qualified. I poured 2 fingers. No ice. Daniel, I said. What happens next? Well, he replied. Technically, nothing has been sold, but he has initiated a process under false authority. If we intervene now, we can stop it cleanly. Cleanly. And if we don't, a slight shift in his tone, then it becomes less clean. I took a sip. The burn was immediate. Honest. I prefer clean, I said. Understood. There was a brief rustle of papers. I can issue a formal notice to Henderson and Blythe, Daniel continued, clarifying ownership, revoking any implied consent, and requesting documentation of all communications with your son. Do it, I said. And Mr. Hale? Yes. There's another matter. Of course there was. He appears to have discussed potential advance funds, Daniel said carefully, based on the anticipated sale. I set the glass down. Slowed. How much? Approximately $75,000. I closed my eyes. Not shock, not even anger. Just confirmation. They never learn, I said quietly. No, Daniel agreed. They usually don't. I walked back to the table and picked up the check again. $10,000. A gesture, he called it. An advance. I turned it over in my hands. On the back, blank. Waiting for endorsement. Waiting for me. Daniel, I said, prepare everything. What specifically? All of it, I replied. The notice, the documentation, request. And I think it's time we scheduled a meeting. A meeting? Yes. With whom? I smiled. With everyone who believes my house is already sold. There was a pause. Then quietly, I'll arrange it. I hung up the phone and sat down once more. The folder lay open. The past, documented in numbers. The present, sitting in ink and assumption. And the future? Well, the future was about to become very inconvenient for someone. I looked around the kitchen one more time. The chipped tiles, the worn table, the quiet. My house, I said aloud. The words felt solid again. Earned, protected, outside. A car passed slowly down the street. Not theirs. Just someone else's life moving forward without complication. For now, I picked up a pen and placed it beside the check. Not to sign. Not yet. First, I wanted them to believe I would. Because the most effective correction is the one people walk into themselves. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 11:00 a.m. Not in my house. That would have been too intimate. Instead, Daniel arranged it at Henderson and Blight's main office. A glass building on Lexington Avenue with polished floors and a receptionist who smiled like she had been trained to do it in front of a mirror. I arrived early, 10:32 a.m. Old habit. If you show up on time, you're already late. The lobby smelled faintly of citrus and money. I took a seat near the window, placed my hat on my knee, and watched people move with purpose. Young men in suits, women with tablets, voices low, efficient, detached. No one looked at me twice. An old man in a worn coat tends to disappear in places like that. I have found that useful. At 10:58, Ethan walked in. He didn't see me at first. He was talking, loud enough to be heard, soft enough to feel important, into his phone. Yes, we're finalizing today, he said. No, it's clean. Completely clean. Completely clean. I almost admired the confidence. Lauren followed 2 steps behind, heels sharp against the marble floor. She spotted me first. Of course she did. Her stride faltered, just slightly. Ethan, she said under her breath. He turned. For a moment, his face went blank. Not guilt, not fear. Calculation. Dad, he said, forcing a smile as he approached. I didn't expect you here. No, I replied calmly. You didn't. Lauren recovered quickly. Mr. Hale, she said, her tone polite but tight. This is actually a business meeting. We didn't want to burden you with. I insist, I said, standing slowly. After all, it concerns my property. A flicker. There it was. Ethan's jaw tightened. It's more of a formality at this point, he said. We've already. Already what? I asked. Silence. Before he could answer, a man in a navy suit approached us, extending his hand. Mr. Hale, he said, looking at Ethan. I stepped forward instead. No, I said, that would be me. The man hesitated, then adjusted smoothly. Of course, he said. Thomas Henderson. We spoke briefly on the phone. Yes, I replied, briefly. His eyes moved between the 3 of us. He understood, at least partially, that something was not aligned. Shall we? He gestured toward the conference room. We followed. Glass walls, long table, bottled water arranged with mathematical precision, a screen at the far end displaying a clean, confident title. Property listing, preliminary review. I took a seat at the head of the table, not because anyone told me to, because it was mine. Ethan and Lauren sat across from me, Henderson at the side, a tablet in front of him. Let's begin, he said, clearing his throat. We've conducted an initial valuation of the property located at. I've seen it, I interrupted. He nodded. Then you understand the market position. Given current conditions, we estimate a sale range between $980,000 and $1.05 million. I folded my hands. And who, I asked, authorized you to proceed with this valuation? Henderson glanced at Ethan. Mr. Hale did, he said carefully. Which one? I asked. The room shifted. Ethan leaned forward. Dad, we've been over this, he said, his voice tightening. I'm handling the process for you. For me, I repeated. Yes, Lauren added quickly. To simplify things. Simplify. I reached into my coat pocket and placed the check on the table. $10,000. It looked smaller here, almost embarrassed. This, I said, tapping it lightly, was your version of simplification. Ethan's face flushed. That's not what this is about, he said. This is about securing your future. No, I said quietly. This is about securing yours. Silence. Henderson shifted in his chair. Perhaps, he began, we should clarify. Yes, I said, we should. I reached into my folder and slid a document across the table. Daniel had prepared it that morning. Crisp, official, unmistakable. Notice of ownership and authority. Hale, Family Trust. Henderson picked it up. He read, slowly, carefully, the way people read when they realize they should have done so earlier. Ethan leaned back, irritation turning to something sharper. What is this? He demanded. Documentation, I replied. Lauren reached for the paper next. Her eyes moved faster, but I could see the moment it landed. No, she said quietly. That's not. It is, I said. Henderson looked up. Mr. Hale, he said, to me this time. This indicates that the property is held under a trust structure requiring dual authorization for any sale. Correct. And he continued flipping the page. The secondary trustee is... Not him, I said. Ethan stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous, he snapped. Dad, you never told me. You never asked, I replied. Lauren's composure cracked. This changes nothing, she said sharply. We have agreements. We have... You have assumptions, I said. The words landed harder than I expected. Henderson set the document down. I'm afraid, he said carefully, that without proper authorization, we cannot proceed with any listing or sale. Ethan turned to him, anger rising. You're backing out? After everything we discussed. We're correcting course, Henderson replied. There's a difference. I leaned back in my chair, calm, measured. But that's not the interesting part, I said. 3 pairs of eyes turned to me. I opened another document. Mr. Henderson, I continued, perhaps you'd like to explain the $75,000 advance discussion. Silence. Sharp. Immediate. Ethan froze. Lauren went pale. Henderson blinked. I beg your pardon, he said. I slid the email printout across the table. Date, time, amount, all of it. Ethan didn't sit down again. He just stood there, staring. I was going to tell you, he said finally. To whom? I asked. Me? Or the people you plan to pay it back with my house? The room felt smaller now, air thinner. Lauren spoke, but her voice had lost its polish. This is being blown out of proportion. No, I said quietly. This is being brought into proportion. I stood up, slowly, deliberately. Mr. Henderson, I said, I trust you'll be sending me a full record of all communications. Of course, he replied quickly. And Ethan, I added, turning to my son, you should sit down. He didn't. Good, because the next part was easier to deliver standing. This, I said, tapping the documents, was the polite version. A pause. Then, the next one won't be. The silence in that glass room didn't end when I finished speaking. It lingered, heavy, uncomfortable, the kind of silence that forces people to finally hear what they've been avoiding. Ethan was still standing. His hands were no longer steady. You're overreacting, he said at last. But the confidence had thinned out of his voice. It sounded stretched, artificial. This is just a misunderstanding. We were going to handle everything properly. Properly. Lauren nodded quickly, seizing the word. Yes, exactly. The advance wasn't finalized. It was just a conversation. Preliminary. These things happen all the time in real estate. Henderson did not confirm that. He stayed very still, eyes lowered to the documents, as if they might rearrange themselves into something less damaging. I watched them both for a moment. It is a strange experience, seeing people you once trusted try to rebuild a collapsing story in real time. The speed at which they reach for words, the way they fill gaps with tone instead of truth. I believe you, I said. They both stopped. Hope is a dangerous thing. It flickered across Ethan's face too quickly. Good, he said. Then we can move past this. And I believe, I continued, that you thought it would work. The flicker died. Lauren's jaw tightened. That's not what you said. she replied sharply. It is exactly what I said, I answered. I gathered the documents slowly, aligning the edges with care. Old habit again. Order, even when everything else is not. This meeting is over, I said. Henderson nodded immediately. Yes, of course. We'll follow up with the requested materials. You will, I said. Ethan didn't move. Dad, he said lower now, almost controlled again. We need to talk about this privately. No, I replied. The word landed flat. Final. Lauren stepped forward. You're making a mistake, she said. Escalating this like this. It doesn't help anyone. It helps me, I said. Her eyes flashed. For what? To prove a point? To humiliate your own son. I looked at her carefully. You've done a fine job of that yourselves. Ethan exhaled sharply. Enough, he snapped. Let's go. But neither of them moved, because they understood something had shifted, and they didn't yet know how far. I put on my coat. Check your email, I said. Ethan frowned. What email? I paused at the door. The one that was sent 12 minutes ago. Then I left. The air outside felt cleaner, cooler, real. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, letting the city move around me. Cars, voices, someone laughing too loudly into a phone. Life continuing indifferent. My phone buzzed. Daniel? I answered. It's done, he said. I assumed it would be. There was a brief pause. You may want to be seated when they read it, he added. I smiled slightly. I don't think they'll have that luxury. Ethan called me 23 minutes later. I let it ring, then again, then a third time. On the fourth, I answered. What did you do? He demanded immediately. No greeting. No hesitation. Good. I clarified the situation, I said. You froze the account, he said, his voice rising. The business account, what the hell, Dad? Language, I replied mildly. This isn't funny, he snapped. Payroll is due tomorrow. There's over 40,000 scheduled. What did you do? I sat down on the bench outside the building. Carefully. I revoked access, I said. You can't do that. I already have. Silence. Breathing on the other end. Fast. Uneven. That account, he said slowly, as if explaining to a child, is under Hale Logistics. It's a corporate account. Yes, I said. Funded in large part by personal transfers from me. Documented. Repeated. Unsecured. That doesn't give you the right. It gives me exactly that right, I interrupted. Another silence. Then, you're going to ruin everything, he said. No anger this time. Fear. Real unpolished fear. I leaned back slightly. Ethan, I said, you already did that. That's not fair. No, I said. What's not fair is wiring $120,000 to your temporary gap and watching it disappear. What's not fair is paying for your wedding while listening to someone else thank you for generosity. What's not fair is being handed a $10,000 check for a house you didn't earn. My voice had not risen. It didn't need to. On the other end, nothing. Then Lauren's voice, faint but sharp. Put it on speaker. A rustle. Mr. Hale, she said, controlled again. This kind of action has legal consequences. Yes, I said. It does. You've interfered with an active business. I protected my assets. You've overstepped. No, I said quietly. I've stepped exactly where I should have years ago. Ethan came back on. What do you want? He asked. There it was. Not apology. Not understanding. Negotiation. I almost respected the consistency. I want nothing, I said. That's not true. It is, I replied. But there are things you're going to do. A pause. Like what? I stood up again, slowly. Tomorrow morning, I said, you're going to receive a formal notice. Demand for repayment, full accounting, and a restriction on any further use of funds connected to my transfers. You're suing me, he said, disbelief creeping in. I'm correcting the record. This is insane. No, I said, this is overdue. Lauren cut in again. You think this will hold up, she said. Family transfers, no contracts, this is going nowhere. I smiled. She still believed that. That's where you're wrong, I said. And for the first time, I allowed a hint of something sharper into my voice. There was a contract. Silence. What? Ethan said. I adjusted my coat. Checked the attachments, I said. Another pause. Longer. I could almost hear them scrolling, reading, understanding, or beginning to. You never, Ethan started. I never what? I asked. Explain it? Highlighted it? Made it easy. My grip tightened slightly on the phone. No, I said. I didn't. because I had learned something over the years. People who are eager to take rarely take the time to read. I stepped off the curb and started walking. Behind me, the city continued its indifferent rhythm. Ahead of me, resolution. And finally, on the other end of the line, I heard it. Not anger, not argument, just one quiet, breaking realization. Dad, what did we sign? There are two kinds of realization. The first comes slowly. It settles in over days, maybe weeks. It negotiates with denial, softens the edges, gives a person time to adjust. The second arrives all at once. Sharp, immediate, irreversible. Ethan experienced the second kind. I could hear it in his silence. Not confusion anymore. Not even anger. Calculation failing. Dad, he said again. But this time the word sounded unfamiliar in his mouth, as if he wasn't sure it still applied in the same way. What did we sign? I stopped walking. The light at the intersection had just turned red. Cars lined up in front of me, engines humming softly, unaware that someone's life had just shifted direction entirely. A repayment agreement, I said. That's not, Lauren started. It is, I interrupted. I leaned against the cold metal pole and let the memory settle in. October 8th, 2021. They had come over for dinner. Lauren brought wine, expensive, unopened, a prop. Ethan talked about expansion, growth, leveraging opportunity. At some point, I had placed a document on the table. Not hidden, not rushed, just present. This is just for structure, I had said. Nothing complicated. Nothing complicated. Ethan barely glanced at it. Lauren skimmed the first page, then flipped to the signature line. Standard, she asked. Standard, I replied. They signed. Both of them. 2 signatures. Always 2. Back at the intersection, the light turned green. I didn't move. On the other end of the line, paper rustled again. Faster now. No, Ethan said. No, this says... Yes, I said. It says secured, he continued, his voice tightening with each word. Secured by my assets, I finished, which include, among other things, the funds transferred to your business. That's not how this works, Lauren snapped. It is exactly how it works, I said. Silence again. Then, you tricked us, she said. The word hung there. Tricked. I considered it. No, I said finally. I gave you something to read. That's not the same. It is, I replied. You just chose not to. Ethan exhaled sharply. This is insane, he muttered. You're going to take the business? After everything I've built? I straightened. After everything I funded? I asked. That was help. That was capital, I corrected. Another silence. Different this time. He was beginning to understand the language. Good. Dad, he said, quieter now, we can fix this. Fix. Another useful word. How? I asked. We'll pay you back, he said quickly. We'll restructure, draw up something new. You already did, I said. No, I mean properly. You mean on your terms, I replied. Lauren cut in again, sharper now, desperation breaking through the polish. You don't actually want the business, she said. You wouldn't know what to do with it. I smiled. That's the first accurate thing you've said all day. She didn't respond, because she understood what came next. I don't want it, I continued, but I will take it. Ethan's breath caught. You can't be serious. I am, I said. The city moved around me. A bus passed. Someone shouted across the street. Life indifferent as always. Effective immediately, I went on. Control of any asset tied to my funding transfers is suspended pending repayment. That's not possible, Ethan said weakly. It already is. What does that even mean? He demanded. It means, I said, each word deliberate, that tomorrow morning your employees will be informed that operations are under review. You wouldn't. I would. His voice broke then, just slightly. People depend on that company. Yes, I said. They do. And you're just going to what? Shut it down? I paused. Not for effect. For accuracy. No, I said. I'm going to see what it's actually worth. Lauren laughed once. Short. Sharp. You think you can just step in and run a logistics company at your age? I let the question sit. Then, no, I said, but I know someone who can. A pause. Then Ethan, quieter. Who? I adjusted my grip on the phone. Daniel didn't just prepare documents, I said. He also made a few calls. Understanding came slower this time, piece by piece. You replaced me, Ethan said. No, I replied. I protected myself. That's the same thing. No, I said again. It isn't. I pushed off the pole and started walking again. There's a difference between losing something, I continued, and discovering you never actually had it. No answer. Just breathing. Heavy now. Uneven. Dad, he said finally, and there was something new in it, something I hadn't heard in years. Not respect. Not yet. But the absence of entitlement. What do you want us to do? I stopped one last time. Cars moved past me. A woman walked her dog across the street. Somewhere a door slammed. Ordinary sounds. Extraordinary moment. I want you, I said, to come to my house tomorrow at 9:00 a.m. For what? Lauren asked. I looked up at the sky. Gray. Flat. Honest. For the first honest conversation we've ever had, I said. A pause. Then quietly. And bring a calculator. I ended the call. And for the first time in a long while, the house was going to feel like mine again. They arrived at 8:57, 3 minutes early. That more than anything told me the situation had finally become real for him. I was already in the kitchen. Same table, same chair, same quiet hum of the refrigerator. I had made coffee. Proper coffee this time, not the instant powder Lauren used to wrinkle her nose at. The kind that takes time. The kind that leaves a smell in the air that doesn't apologize for itself. 2 extra cups sat on the table. Not as a gesture of hospitality, as a reminder. When Ethan walked in, he didn't look around the house the way he usually did, quick, dismissive, as if evaluating something beneath him. This time he looked carefully, at the walls, at the floor, at the table, as if trying to understand where exactly things had gone wrong. Lauren followed behind him, quieter than I had ever seen her. No heels today, flat shoes, practical, good. Sit, I said. They did. No arguments, no performance, just compliance. For a moment, no one spoke. I let it stretch. Then I reached for the folder. Not the old one, the new one. Clean, ordered, final. I opened it and turned it toward them. Let's begin, I said. Ethan swallowed. Lauren leaned forward. Numbers filled the pages. Not estimates, not approximations. Exact figures. Every transfer, every date, every memo line they had once ignored. At the bottom of the first page, total, $347,820. Lauren's lips parted slightly. Ethan stared. That's not, he began. It is, I said. I slid the next page forward. Interest, modest, conservative, documented, adjusted total, $412,560. Silence, the kind that doesn't need reinforcement. Ethan leaned back slowly, as if the chair might give way beneath him. We can't pay that, he said. Not anger, not denial, just fact. I know, I replied. Lauren looked up sharply. Then what is this, she demanded. What are you trying to prove? I met her gaze. Nothing, I said. This isn't about proof. Then what? I closed the folder gently. This, I said, is about correction. Ethan ran a hand over his face. So what happens now, he asked. There it was again. Not what do you want? Not how do we fight this? Just what happens? I stood up and walked to the window. The oak tree outside swayed slightly in the morning wind. Same as always. Roots deep enough to crack stone, but steady enough to outlast it. Your company, I said without turning, is currently under review. Ethan didn't respond. He already knew. Daniel has identified 2 potential buyers, I continued. Not for the house. A pause. For the business. Lauren's breath caught. You're selling it? She said. I'm evaluating it. I corrected. You said you didn't want it. I don't, I replied. But I won't let it continue as it is. Ethan's voice came out low. If you sell it, we lose everything. I turned back to them. No, I said. You lose what was never fully yours. The words landed. Harder this time, because now they understood them. Lauren shook her head. This is punishment, she said. No, I replied. This is consequence. Ethan looked down at the numbers again, at the total, at the weight of it. What do we do? He asked quietly. I walked back to the table and sat down. For a moment, I let myself look at him. Not as he was now, but as he had been. A boy with a broken bicycle. A boy who didn't know how to fix it. A boy who learned. Or at least I thought he had. You start, I said, by acknowledging something simple. He looked up. That this, I tapped the folder lightly, was not help. A pause. And slowly, it was money, he said. Not enough. He hesitated. Then, it was yours. I nodded, and his jaw tightened. It wasn't ours, he finished. There it was, small, fragile, but real. Lauren didn't speak. For once, she had nothing to add. I leaned back in my chair. The company will be restructured, I said. If it survives, it will do so without access to anything that isn't earned. And us? Ethan asked. I considered that. Careful. You'll have the opportunity, I said, to work. The word felt almost foreign in the room. Under supervision, I added. With accountability. With limits. Lauren finally spoke. You're offering us jobs, she said. Disbelief creeping back in. No, I said. I'm offering you a chance to understand the difference. Silence again, but not the same kind. This one settled. Ethan nodded once. Slowly. Lauren looked at him, then back at me. Something in her expression shifted. Not warmth, not regret, but awareness. It would have to be enough. I stood up. The meeting was over. Not with a slam, not with a threat. Just finished. They rose as well. No one reached for the folder. Good. Some things are heavier when you don't carry them. At the door, Ethan paused. Dad, he said. I waited. He hesitated. Then, I didn't think it mattered. I looked at him. I know, I said. He nodded. And for the first time in a very long while, he didn't try to explain it away. They left quietly. No slammed doors. No raised voices. Just the sound of footsteps fading down the path. I closed the door behind them and stood there for a moment. The house was still, but not empty. Not anymore. I walked back to the kitchen, picked up the check, and looked at it one last time. $10,000. I tore it in half, then again, and dropped it into the trash. Because some debts aren't measured in money, and some lessons are worth far more than $1 million. Stories like this happen more often than we think. By the way, where are you watching from? Drop your city or state below. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe to the channel.